Welcome back to Trauma, Drama, and Life. I'm your host, Ben Taylor, and my wife,
Kayla Taylor.
we're super glad to be here. You guys have been showing so much love and so much gratefulness just for this podcast. I wanted to thank you and appreciate you so much. If you get the chance, like, rate, review, share it, because we've been really surprised on how much the podcast has kind of like blown up. This now time of recording is our 6th episode, and
Wow.
can't believe it. Like we've been doing this just for a month, really, and been really shocked. Y'all have been very gracious on stuff that you guys have written in, either to the email ben@rawmotivations.com, or you've been messaging stuff on Instagram, or maybe you've clicked on one of the polls. And so if you want to have topics or different things particularly that you want to have us answer or discuss, feel free to be able to leave that. We'll probably be working on putting something like on the website, like official, of like, hey, fill this out so we know. But until we get our act together, we're just here kind of winging it, and y'all are gracious enough to listen. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. What we want to dive into and talk about some today is some of the concepts about arguing and managing conflict, and kind of give you a glimpse into the past of what that looked like in the past and how that kind of transpired. And then also what we do now on a day-to-day basis to try to be able to process and deal with conflict in a healthy and a safe way, versus a mean old narcissistic way kind of thing.
Yeah.
So anyways, conflict. What did that look like in the past? Like, what, from your perspective, what was conflict? What was like arguments and stuff like that in the past?
Terrible.
Right?
No, but like really it was awful. It was kind of like how we touched on the last podcast. I would literally go into any type of conflict or situation and just have this like fight or flight response, or I would freeze and just kind of like disassociate, and it was not good at all. And there would be a lot of like going around in a circle of like you would say something, and besides in a normal healthy conflict you would say it, you'd get your emotions out, you'd say this is what is wrong, how do we fix it? And instead it would be like this circular thing where we would still not really get anywhere, and we would end up attacking the other person and each other.
Like a lot of arguments and the conflict was more or less like something's there that's inconveniencing me, and then when you try to hold me accountable, it's like, let me figure out how I can attack you so that I don't have to deal with that shame, that guilt, that frustration, anything like that.
Yeah, and then in return, because of how I am, my personality, I would attack you back, which is obviously not the correct thing to do at all, but you know, it's
right. And like we mentioned before, like that wasn't like immediate, that was something that built up over a period of time too. But I mean, in the relationship, a big aspect, early on, is we just both thought the relationship was kind of crappy, kind of first year of marriage, of like, this isn't working out well, like we just like we have issues, like we did what, premarital counseling, and that was kind of a joke.
We can say that for another topic. I think somebody asked about that.
Okay,
like,
yeah.
Counseling,
so that didn't help. But we also did like other counseling. We did friends and like personality stuff, and other like counseling stuff to try to be able to help fix conflict and things like that. Yeah. And there's a big aspect that we never really had the tools or the resources or even understood a lot of times what that conflict was. It was more or less like, let me try to destroy your argument, and if I can't destroy your argument logically, then I'll try to destroy you logically so that your argument no longer stands.
Yeah.
Or so it's no longer like effective.
Right. And so it would not get anywhere. And so I would walk away feeling defeated, and he would walk away feeling, I don't even know, like happy or whatever, like he won, but in reality, like nothing got accomplished.
Right. In reality, we both lost. It wasn't, and that's the hard thing, is like, it's either like either I win or I don't win. I win or I'm shamed, and so it's like, let's not deal with shame. So like, I'm going to win at all costs.
And on the times that he did feel shame or whatever, like I was actually able to logically somehow get to him, then he would still at some point be like, well, that didn't get anywhere. Like,
Right.
You would just make like underhanded comments.
Or I'd flip on you. You'd be like, hey, that. So like, I guess a popular one is like, hey, that cup is blue. And, we'd argue about it for, 30 minutes or an hour. And then I'd be like, yeah, that cup is blue. And you'd be like, what? And I'd be like, yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah. Like, just like and those things like I would pick up on. I'm like, you literally said that cup was white,
Mm-hmm.
and like then it would start to turn into like us going back and forth, and I was like, okay, whatever. Like I know that I am right in what I heard you say,
Right. But then
but
I think I normally like would walk away from the conversation at that point
right,
because in my mind I just switched it so that I'm right anyway, so then it's
yeah,
okay for me to disengage.
yeah. So that whole like gaslighting aspect.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, huge aspect of that. There's something else I was gonna say, but I forgot. But yeah, just the conflicts were never good. Were never good in how we engaged with it, of how I treated you. I was gonna mention like how petty, how petty the arguments could be, because I
Hmm.
think like some people are like, well, like it seems like so stupid that we'd be arguing about this, but like we argued about a lot of stupid things, right?
Oh yeah, we'd we'd probably argue. I mean,
Putting you on the
like
spot as far
something.
as
I
like
know. I'm
what did
trying
they
to
go?
like
Yeah.
think,
There's
but
like a lot of things that we would like argue about, or that I would go off on you about. I remember because I did a video a while back, where you reminded me of like how like it wasn't an argument, it was a conflict of like me coming at you because of the noodles that you used. Remember that?
oh yeah, like his mom makes this dish that he really likes, and so I tried to um recreate it.
Hmm.
Literally got the exact same noodles because I wanted to make sure that I was gonna get like the wife of the year award for like making this dish. And he was
Right.
like, "You used the wrong noodles." And I was like, "I did not." And so like he just like stuff like that of like, well, this does not taste like my mom's. Like you used the wrong
Right.
noodles, and just stuff stupid like little
Which is
comments.
crazy how much it's like ingrained, because even like recounting that story, there's like a piece of me inside that's like, no, they were the wrong noodles. That wants to be like, but they didn't taste the same. Which I mean is probably just my perception of it, not even the reality of like what I had, because like I have such a skewed perception of everything at that
Yeah.
point, you know. But I also think like with arguing and conflict, a huge part is destroying the argument. Like there's a huge aspect that as the narcissist, it's like if I can if I can win the argument, that's one thing. If I feel like I can't win the argument, then I destroy the argument. And if I can't win by destroying the argument, then I have to destroy you as a person so that your
Mhm.
argument doesn't stand.
Right.
Hope that makes sense. So like, but it could be as petty as like you be like, hey, I showed up at 10 o'clock and you weren't there, and we have this whole argument because I'm like, well, I'm actually right because you showed up at 10:01. Like just anything that I can find in your story to get rid of it. And it only makes sense in the mind of the narcissist of like, you drove to work and you saw a blue bird, well, actually it was red, so actually you didn't drive to work. Like that's how like
Right.
the mind goes of like, if I can destroy one tiny piece of your argument, then the whole argument falls, which is not really the case. It's just like one tiny fragment of it, but like in the narcissist mind, and oftentimes makes the other person believe that like, hey, you didn't see that, or this didn't happen, or this one you were late by 1 minute, so therefore everything you've been saying is like discounted.
Yeah. So, yeah. And just so everybody's clear, I've not made those noodles ever since either.
But we've had that dish. What news have you made? Just
Your from your mom. Your mom has made it, but
you
I have
haven't made
not
that
made
dish?
it anymore since
Really?
you said
But now I feel bad.
that. But anyways, yeah. So it just goes back to yeah, like what he was saying is it's just their mind is like very logical, and I think that if you are not somebody who likes logic or analytics or analyzes things, then like those types of conversations are going to be, or conflicts or arguing or whatever is going to be 20 times harder for you. And I'm not saying that to like discourage anybody. I'm just saying if that's not your forte, then like they are going to easily be able to like destroy like any claim that you have. And I think
Mhm.
that that is kind of where I had like a slight leg up, because like I knew logically going into something that if I had the evidence,
Mhm.
I was like very confident of like, yeah, I'm gonna like quote unquote win this argument, which is
Right.
so weird in thinking because like you don't want to win arguments when you're married. Like you're supposed
To work
to
together.
work together.
Right.
But just when you're not in a healthy situation, in a healthy environment, then that's kind of like your goal is to like set out to win against that person. And so there would be times that I would walk away feeling like defeated of like, man, my logic isn't like great, or like it would be like discouraging to me, or kind of like a blow at my like confidence in my logic or analytics, when really like he's literally taking one little bitty tiny detail and like twisting it. Or if we would be going on into this conflict for, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 minutes, and we would get back to the start of the argument, and I would misspeak and like say the statement wrong. He'd be like, see, you said it wrong, therefore invalid. Like, so if I wasn't like if my mind was getting tired of like having to present like all of these facts and like everything else, and like having to rehash them every single time after time after time after time, my mind would start to just kind of like disassociate, and then I would just like slip up, and that's where he would like come in and like be like crushed.
Right. Like therefore, like your whole
Argument
thought process
is, like,
argument
done.
isn't valid.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge aspect, and I would we try not to generalize, because like not all narcissists are going to do that or be that exact same way, but there is like a definite aspect of it, especially I would say a lot of like covert types that use either knowledge, power, different things to be able to try to influence other people to think or to respond or to react a certain way.
Yeah.
So I think there's like a huge aspect of that. What do you feel like was that you started noticing like when you came back, as far as like a change in like the arguing and like the conflict, and how we start to navigate that now?
Yeah, so I think that's like super hard, because if you've listened to some of our previous podcasts, I talk about when I came back, it was so triggering in the aspect of like when we'd have to face conflict, and I knew that there'd be that time, like, because coming back, like, whether we were going to stay together or not, I knew conflict was going to arise because of everything from our past. And so I remember just being super guarded in our first like conflict, and I think that we both in one sense just like froze. Like, I remember there was times, I don't remember the exact conflict it was, but I remember when we both went into the argument, we were like, X, Y, and Z, this is blah, blah, blah. And so we would like say our things, and then we would just like freeze. And like nobody we reacted. Like we didn't, nobody reacted, nobody did anything. And we were just like, what do we do?
I think there's definitely like a fear on both sides of like, you're afraid that I'm going to react, and then I'm afraid that I'm going to react, or I'm afraid that like how I react is going to determine like what you're going to do, and that like confidence piece on both sides that was missing.
Yeah. So it took us a while, like a long time, working with our counselor and all, to just figure out how to even go about like having healthy conflict. And I would say it's really, I mean, there's been some obviously like learning curves and stuff, but I think that like we're now at a place to where it is like healthier. Obviously,
it's still triggering. It's still like, I think it's healthy to be like, hey, even though, we've been like actively like working on this for, a year or so kind of thing, like there's still moments that are extremely triggering, and, sometimes people ask, like, are you worried about him slipping up, or like, do you ever slip up? And, I'm like, I'm human, so there's times that, I've been, extremely triggered, and, really, in the past year, I can only remember like one time where I got like really upset kind of thing, and it was super hard to be able to calm that down. But even I think the other really good example really was it was like 2 days ago or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was like, we could both feel it. Like it wasn't a super awful or hard argument, but it was one that like I can look back now and identify like I was triggered with shame, because like I originally said something, and then I like wanted to change my mind on it and wanted to stick with like the new thought process, and then I felt bad that I was doing it, and I felt bad that I was impacting you that way. Like I didn't want to own up to that. I was owning up to it, but I didn't want to feel that, and it was like extremely triggering. So I think from my perspective at least, it was engaging a little bit of like fight and flight on your side, and it was engaging more fight on my side, and like because I could feel it like wanting to bubble up.
Right.
And, I remember being like, hey, like we need to like stop. And then you were like, we need to calm down and like put a pause on this because like it was something that just like I could feel like
Yeah.
I don't know. It was like
And then the
the
time
rage
of
trigger was trying to get
right.
pressed,
And the time of day that it was, I mean, if you have kids, you always have that chaotic like house, like that chaotic time in your house, and ours is always in the evenings, afternoons, around after dinner, around bath time.
Right.
And that's exactly when this like conversation was taking place. But it started at dinner, and then it just kind of trickled in. And like I looked at him at a point because our daughter is like having like the time of her life in the background, screaming and like carrying on like not a care in the world. And I looked at him, and he like we're both already like on this like fight mode.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at him, and I'm like, this is not the time or the place to have this conversation. I was like, we both are like getting very triggered and like
Mm-hmm.
very upset. We just need to take a pause. And so in that moment, like, I think neither one of us, like, in one sense, like, we knew that was the right thing, but it's also, we haven't been faced with this type of conflict, like,
Mm-hmm.
as far as like being this triggered before. And really it's just because there's like other things of life, like you're going to be more triggered when there's other stressors in your life going around,
Right.
going on, and it just happened to be like right now we're just in a season of stress.
Right.
And so it's just one of those like things of like this conversation probably wouldn't have been as triggering if other things wouldn't have been happening, but it is triggering, so how are we going to handle it?
Mm-hmm.
And so honestly, like I'm proud of like how we handled it, because before it would have just exploded.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd have just like he would have raged at me, or I would have raged at him, and like just kind of like word vomited like everything that's happening like in our lives right now that's like
Right.
very frustrating and triggering and like all this thing. And so instead we just were like, we can't attack the person. And I think that's like the biggest thing that we've like learned and like grown from is like the person is not the problem. I mean, yes, he is a narcissist, so there's that's the
Big
case.
red
But
flag.
when yeah,
Big red flag.
but I mean,
Right.
if you're in a healthy relationship, so like even if you're listening to this and like wondering how we deal with conflict now, like, and you're in a healthier relationship and not a toxic relationship, like
Mm-hmm.
the person is not the problem, it's the conflict. So like whatever is causing
Dealing
you
with
to
the
be triggered.
attacking
Yeah.
the problem instead of the person.
Correct.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think it's hard because like in that moment, I had to be open to you saying like, let's put a pause on it, which I'd kind of like said that in my mind and in my words, but they definitely didn't come out as nicely. It was just more like just stop, like it was like it was like frustrated kind of thing. And there also has to be like that openness, which I think for me also tracks back to like the guilt and the shame, but also like that safety, which normally people don't talk about it on like the narcissist side of like they want safety and things like that. And it's hard because then you can give people like too much hope of like, oh, I just need to love them and make a safe space so they can abuse me more, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like I try not to talk about that in that aspect, but like for me, like trying to grow and change in what I'm doing, there also has to be like that like safety of like, okay, if we put a pause in this conversation, it doesn't mean that I'm the worst person in the world. It doesn't activate like all this shame that says like, okay, like you're an awful dad, you're an awful husband, that kind of thing. But like I can actually like sit in that moment where before like that was never even like a possibility. It was like, you just told me to stop. Like, what are you talking about? Like it would just go like, that would be another trigger to like rage out even more.
Yeah. And so yeah, in that aspect we've definitely like grown in that way. And then it's just dealing with like little conflicts, like we just kind of like address them.
And I think it helps whenever we're both able to, as we're both learning and growing, to engage in different levels of vulnerability, because that really is what helps produce any type of change, is being able to be honest and vulnerable with where we actually are, what we're doing, what we're feeling, and then understanding that like at the end of the day, like I can be vulnerable with you and you're still here to like help me work through it, or you can be vulnerable with me and I'm not going to rage on you. That like safety piece I think is huge, that did not exist before, and if you're listening to this today and it doesn't exist in your relationship, like don't be holding on to that pipe dream. If there's no change behavior, honesty, vulnerability, and consistent change, then you're not in a healthy relationship that you should be investing that time, money, and energy into.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was gonna say that too. Just don't like think that just because like he's changed or whatever, that like it's gonna be just, this is our little disclaimer, that that's gonna be your
Or episode disclaimer.
your scenario as well. But again, you just have to look for consistent change. Like if they say they're going to change, look for consistent change, vulnerability, and just them actively trying to create a safe space. Like safety goes both ways. It's not just a one-way street. So like I could have a safe space for him, but if he doesn't create a safe space for me, then that's still like a toxic relationship. Like that's not healthy. That's not.
It's not going to help us get anywhere or progress or anything. And some of that I feel like we've dived into and been able to engage and understand more of that going through counseling and therapy, like individually for a good while, and then now together as a couple being able to see. And there's been like several times that I feel like I've had different like epiphanies of, you know, especially like the problem, not the person, you know, like there's been a lot of times I attribute, you know, there being a problem to it being, it's all about me, you know, obviously, but like, it's all about me as far as like I'm the problem. So activate shame. So activates, you know, my flight response or my fight response kind of a thing versus like actually dealing with the problem consistently. But again, we only made that choice to go to counseling together, like after we'd already been doing like our own individual therapy for, you know, years kind of a thing.
Yeah. So and after I came back and stuff like that.
Yeah. So. Obviously. Yeah. But yeah, that's I think that's all we got. That's all we got on our sticky note today. So if you guys want to hear more just about our lives, more questions, more things that like we've been talking through, kind of snippets into our life, feel free to be able to email us at ben@rawmotivations.com, or you can shoot me a message on Instagram, or we'll see maybe about putting up a poll, maybe like every Monday whenever you do it, just to get more feedback from you guys of what you guys want to hear. You guys have been super amazing and super grateful for everybody who's like, shared, and rated, and reviewed everything. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Sounds good. See you then.